Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let me start by saying, first, I'm happy that everyone has come down today for this very important conversation. I want to thank everyone. Now, let me give you the downside of the second part of that conversation is that because the fact that so many people came down today, everybody will not be able to testify today. We anticipated a relatively significant turnout, so we scheduled 2 days. So we would like to make sure that we accommodate everybody's opportunity to have input on this very important issue. But we will have some of the dialogue today based on the number of people that responded, and then we will follow up with tomorrow's testimony, which will pretty much be the entire day. We had a city council session today, which we're required to do every Thursday. So as a result of that, we only have a half a day today. So I just wanted to let you know that. I know some people have been trying to get bumped up on the witness list, but we've been listing people as they've indicated their willingness to or interest in testifying today. So we want to make sure we accommodate everybody. Thank you very much. And we will formally start. Now the hearing is called to order. We have a, we do not. We don't need a quorum. All right, we have members here today. I'd like to recognize, I want to acknowledge Councilman Kinney, O'Brien Good, Greenlee, Johnson, and Nielsen. And I saw a couple other members pop in and out. This is a public hearing on the Committee of the Whole. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony on Resolution 140869. Would the clerk please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 140869, entitled, "A Resolution Authorizing City Council's Committee of the Whole to hold hearings to fully explore opportunities to further establish the Philadelphia region as an energy hub."
Thank you very much. I'll say a couple of words and then I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Tasco, and then we'll start with our first witness. As I said earlier, I really appreciate all of you coming down to talk about this very important initiative. We believe, and I think the one thing that everybody is on the same page, regardless, be it the administration, members of council, stakeholders, a person walking down the street, or anybody that turns on their gas or some other utility, is that there exists an opportunity in the city of Philadelphia to strengthen what we believe to be a significantly positioned energy opportunity, given the strategic location of the city, given the infrastructure associated with the perimeter of our current facility, Philadelphia Gas Works, and all of the people that are engaged in this process. We've had some recent additions to our energy opportunities in the city, and we really appreciate those folks showing an interest in our city. But at the end of the day, we have to take advantage of this very important opportunity. So at some point, we all have to get on the same page, and we all have to aggressively move towards expanding this opportunity in a very aggressive way to create the type of hub that most of us believe that we should, and at the end of the day, creating low-cost energy opportunities for employment and to continue to grow our region. So I want to thank you very much, and I will turn it over to Councilwoman Tasco, and then we'll start right after that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm very happy that this day is here. At last, we are starting a public conversation about the future direction of PGW and all of the options available to us that include City Council and key stakeholders. The mayor decided to skip this conversation and pick the most extreme alternative to permanently divest ourselves of a very valuable city asset. The mayor continues to pretend that he involved council in this process, but actions speak louder than words. Yes, he invited council members and others to a couple of meetings at which he told us what he was going to do. But that is not what fair-minded people think of as a collaborative process. No, and a true collaboration involves doing the hard work to engage all of the stakeholders to arrive at a consensus on the best steps for moving forward. The mayor skipped this process too, even though his own consultants told him that this is what he needed to do to have a successful outcome. My council colleagues will all remember we asked repeatedly to see all of the sale agreement documents, not just the city and UIL's asset purchase agreement. But the administration consistently refused to provide them. What did they tell us? They're confidential and you can't see them. Is that the way to work with fellow elected officials and the public if you are real about having a participatory process? Again, action speaks louder than words. Council's independent consultants, Concentric Energy Advisors, did confirm that the price offered by UIL was reasonable. But this is not only about money. Concentric also confirmed that the sale agreement entered into by the mayor left out many details that are very important to council members and our constituents. They outlined the many supposed commitments made by UIL, which either are not in the contract or only there in a limited way. That is why the proposed deal is simply not good enough to gain council's approval. It is not a slam dunk for the citizens or our city. The mayor insists that council can still make changes to the proposed deal, but that is not what he and the law department told council members in April. No, they told us that council has the authority to approve or disapprove the sale agreement. In other words, vote it up or down. And that if council wanted to make quote unquote modest changes as a condition of approval, the city and UIL would have to agree to those. But they could only agree to small changes and only to the limited degree allowed by the city's competitive bidding laws and rules. So where did that leave us? Pretty much with take it or leave it situation in my book. So let us move on to the broader issues that are before us. As has often been said by the council president, this is the people's house. This afternoon and tomorrow, we hope to engage with a broad and diverse cross-section of the community on the issues raised by this council resolution. And I am particularly interested in hearing discussion of Concentrics and other ideas about how PGW can be an active participant in energy and economic development opportunities for the Philadelphia region. I also like to say that it would have been very helpful, and I told the president, we might have had a conference or a retreat with all of the interested parties to talk about the highest and best use of PGW and then decide what the plan would be to take that action. But we're here today to start that process, and I thank you all for coming to give us your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Our first witness today for my witness list. Thank you. Our first witness today will be Robert Yarley and Andrew McBride from the Concentric Energy Advisors. This is the consultant that the City Council of Philadelphia commissioned to do the analysis on the proposal and the highest and best use. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Is this microphone? It is on. Okay. First of all, thank you to the City Council.
Yeah, pull a little closer.
Okay.
It's an old building. You know.
Beautiful building. Thank you to the City Council for placing your trust in us, and to the City Council team that we worked with, that were quite diligent. The report is an independent report. It's our report. Its flaws and strengths are our responsibility, and we're proud of the report. It was a privilege to work on this particular assignment. It was very challenging for us. As we conducted the assignment, we kept in mind as well the citizens of Philadelphia. What could we do to improve the future outlook for the citizens of Philadelphia. That was what we kept top of mind. The question we asked was, how can PGW contribute to the value creation for PGW's customers and more broadly for the city? We wanted to leverage what was unique about the city. There are some unique aspects to Philadelphia, and we'll mention those in a few minutes, and come up with an integrated strategy, which consists of several opportunities that we'll get to. All of the opportunities derive from, as you'll see, from PGW's core business. There were a couple of opportunities. When we looked at them, we determined that they were really either beyond the core business or might threaten in some way PGW's ability to provide safe, reliable, affordable service to the citizens of Philadelphia. And so in that case, we've recommended that PGW not pursue those particular opportunities. I want to note at the outset that PGW is delivering on many of these today. We'll cite that as we go through the opportunities. So they are working on many of these today, so our comments will be recognizing the contributions that they're making and making some suggestions as to how further value might be extracted from those opportunities. For the most part, the opportunities don't really depend on ownership. There are a couple of implementation details that might depend on the ownership structure, but for the most part, they really don't depend very much on ownership. But they all depend on sound decision-making, commitment, and execution. So it's great to have a PowerPoint, it's great to have plans, but ultimately, the ability to realize these opportunities will depend upon the ability to execute. So I probably should have introduced myself. Bob Yardley with Concentric Energy Advisors. I have a background in the energy industry for most of my career on both the regulatory side, technical rate making, gas supply, both the electric and gas industries. And for 2 years, I was chairman of the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, which is analogous to the PUC here in Pennsylvania. Andrew McBride is with me. Andrew is focusing his career on market-related issues, which includes CNG, LNG, gas supply markets in general, and other products. So I focus a little more on regulation. Andrew does the fun stuff. I'm just going to touch briefly on I'm looking at my slide person. Just go right to the next slide, if you will, Dan. We start with one more. We start when I apologize. These slides are available on the City Council website, so I can't read them. Those of you that can see better than I might be able to see them. But we start with the definition of highest and best use, which is taking advantage of all of PGW's assets. We've listed them and we discussed them in the report, the pipes, the LNG facilities, obviously the workforce, and customer relationships with a very large proportion of the customers, the businesses and residences in Philadelphia. Those relationships have value. And PGW can also leverage things that are inherent to the city, its location, its transportation networks, higher education institutions, and its location close to the Marcellus-Utica Shale. And we'll talk about how we see them being able to do that. The next slide is really a critical slide. This is what's unique about Philadelphia. PGW serves only one city. Most LDCs, or local distribution companies, serve many cities. PGW serves one city. If PGW does well, the city does well. So it's a one-for-one relationship. The financial health of PGW, which is a critical component of what we're talking about, is integral to the success of the city. And the opportunities and the big opportunity comes right from that. And I'll just start with a simple example. To the extent that PGW is able to deliver supply, acquire and deliver supply at lower cost, every single customer of PGW benefits from that. They pay lower rates, they're able to take those savings, invest in their businesses, make up for college savings, there are any number of things that citizens can do with that money. So that's ultimately the place that you start. Up in the upper right-hand side, they can invest in new programs. They can invest in energy efficiency. And they can do so by taking some of those savings and applying them elsewhere. They can participate with the city to attract new businesses. So there are lots of things that a healthy PGW can do that we want to keep in mind. And they can support the pipeline replacement program. So all these things are interrelated. To the extent they're able to deliver on these programs, customers save, the economy is better off, and where the loop is closed really is something that's very unique about Philadelphia, which is the degree to which PGW supports customers in need. Low-income and other customers that are members or participants in what's called the Customer Responsibility Program. These customers pay bills based upon income level and size of family and so forth. So it's a tremendous program for these customers. So anything that can be done to improve the economy provides job opportunities for some of these customers and ultimately will allow them, if we can invest in energy efficiency, to use less energy. So it all feeds around, and if we're able to do that, that portion of the total cost of PGW's business, if we can bring that cost down, that helps PGW. They're able to do more things, and the cycle gets closed. So that's kind of the theme that we've identified and laid out and propose that you all consider. In terms of PGW today, it's the largest municipally owned gas company. I think most of you are aware of that. It has a very high saturation of natural gas already. There is some incremental opportunity to serve new customers that are already located within the city. Obviously, it can contribute to attracting new customers as part of a broader team that involves other city agencies. I spoke about the social commitments, the Customer Responsibility Program already. It has a broad suite of energy efficiency programs and is now entering into natural gas vehicles through compressed natural gas, and has been marketing a new technology, not really new technology, but a more economical technology, combined heat and power, that we'll come back to later in the presentation. The gas supply is sourced from the Gulf Coast, and sales of LNG are already being sold, surplus LNG that it doesn't need to supply customers on the coldest days of the year. To the extent it has surplus LNG, it's able to and has been selling that to transportation and other new markets for that product, generating profits that then can be used to lower gas bills of customers. It has been benefiting from the Marcellus, both indirectly and directly. We talk about the indirect benefits. The Marcellus and other shale finds throughout the United States have really reduced gas prices across the board. Philadelphia and PGW has benefited from that directly. PGW is also sourcing supplies more recently from the Marcellus and providing some benefits using its long-term pipeline contracts. So that's a benefit we didn't acknowledge in the report, so we just wanted to correct that today. And there are still more opportunities to do so that Andrew will speak to. And finally, PGW is, through the PUC program, accelerating its pipe replacement program. It has a ways to go. There are roughly 3,000 miles, just ballpark, of pipe in the city of Philadelphia. 1,500 are cast iron. LDCs throughout the country are replacing that cast iron as quickly as they can, subject to cost implications, and replacing cast iron is very disruptive. Replacing any pipe means opening the city and disrupting the lives of residential customers and businesses that rely on traffic to come to their particular business. So that is quite a challenge for the city that it's pursuing. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who's going to lay the groundwork for some of the gas supply-related and LNG-related opportunities.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so this next slide touches mostly on natural gas prices, the changing environment there, as well as the relationship of natural gas prices to other energy commodity prices, and some of the opportunities that that's providing for PGW. For starters, advances in drilling technologies over the past decade have made it possible and economical to extract vast amounts of natural gas from shale resources across North America. The resulting flood of natural gas that has been produced as a result of these technologies has dramatically lowered the cost of natural gas across North America again. Most forecasts have this lower cost natural gas price environment lasting for decades to come. The low cost of natural gas and that low cost environment currently benefits all existing users of natural gas, whether or not they're directly sourcing gas from these shale resources, as Bob alluded to. But it's also producing a number of new opportunities for natural gas. U.S. prices for natural gas are currently considerably lower than most international gas prices, and that is generating a lot of interest here in the U.S. to construct LNG export terminals and ship the domestic gas to these international markets to capture these higher prices. There are a number of development projects already underway here in the U.S. as well as across the globe. Domestically, natural gas prices are now at a historic price differential, a discount to oil prices as well as refined products or petroleum products like diesel that come from crude oil. And again, you can see on the graphic on the left here, this graphic is specific to the relationship between natural gas and distillate fuel oil, or diesel. But you can see in this forecast, the price differential is substantial and is projected to remain that way out through 2040. And that's a fairly consensus opinion. The price differential currently between natural gas domestically and these other refined products is basically right now supporting the conversion costs, or basically incenting users of equipment that currently run on diesel to make changes to allow this equipment to instead run on natural gas, with the anticipated fuel savings from these conversions covering the necessary upfront costs over a reasonable period of time. And this type of conversion opportunity is creating a number of opportunities in turn for PGW. They have the ability to, and they're obviously already, Bob mentioned it's a fairly saturated market, but there is additional conversions among the residential, commercial, and industrial customers that's possible, switching them from fuel oil to natural gas, greater penetration of combined heat and power, and then something I'll touch on in more detail in a bit, entry into these new markets to become a potential fuel supplier of certain forms of natural gas to new markets, such as transportation and industrial purposes. Within transportation, you're seeing compressed natural gas making inroads and in terms of becoming an alternative to gasoline for light-duty vehicles. And then for LNG, you're seeing that becoming a viable alternative now to a number of transportation methods, heavy-duty trucking, marine vessels, and to some extent, freight rail as well. And then on the industrial side, it is also a currently attractive and viable alternative to diesel for drilling and fracking operations, which again are a big part of what's going on out in the Marcellus in the western part of the state. So if we can go to the next slide. This slide here gets at sort of the changing gas supply picture and provides a little more context there. Prior to the advent of shale gas in the last decade, all or certainly most of the LDCs, local distribution companies, or gas utilities in the Northeast were reliant on distant supplies, typically from the Gulf Coast and Southwest or from Western Canada, and these supplies were delivered to their service territories using long-haul pipelines. As Bob had noted, PGW has begun to source some of their gas from the Marcellus, but they still get the majority of their gas and from the Gulf Coast. The majority is sourced in the Gulf Coast. And that is not unusual. Most of the LDCs in the Northeast still do rely on Gulf Coast contracts and are now also turning to the Marcellus as a way to serve load growth, and also looking at it as a potential cost savings mechanism and a way to diversify supply. The Marcellus in the graphic on the slide, is the area shaded green. You can see it's a very large basin covering large portions of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. And the production from the Marcellus has been prolific. It continues to exceed forecasts and expectations. And currently, although it's less than 10 years old, the Marcellus Basin now accounts for 20% or 1/5 of all U.S. domestic gas production. The rate of growth in production in the Marcellus has been such that it has outpaced the associated necessary development of pipeline infrastructure to provide takeaway capacity to bring this gas to markets. And as a result, prices in the Marcellus Basin have been depressed and are among the lowest, if not the lowest, in the United States and North America. There are a slate of projects in development that will provide additional takeaway capacity for Marcellus gas and partially alleviate this constraint. However, even taking that into account, it is expected, and the markets are currently showing, that Marcellus gas prices will remain among the least expensive in all of North America for the foreseeable future, trading at a significant discount to benchmark Gulf Coast prices. Another important note about Marcellus supplies is that some of the gas in the Marcellus, particularly the gas found in southwestern Pennsylvania, as well as parts of Ohio and West Virginia, is what's known as wet gas, implying that this gas not only contains the methane that is put into pipelines and delivered to customers like PGW's customers, it also contains other natural gas liquids. These would be ethane, propane, butane, and natural gasoline. And these products need to be removed from the gas stream before it is put into pipelines. But it's important to note that these products themselves are very valuable commodities, in fact, more valuable than the natural gas right now. And while, as we note in our report, we think it's outside of PGW's core strengths to attempt to become a transporter or supplier of these natural gas liquids, it's important to note that the availability of these products just a few hundred miles away from Philadelphia presents a number of opportunities for the city in terms of helping to revitalize refining operations in and around the city, as well as the potential, these products are typically used as feedstocks in manufacturing processes and other industrial processes. And so for businesses looking to come to Philadelphia or potentially deciding whether or not to stay in Philadelphia, the access to these low-cost and highly valuable natural gas liquids is another important opportunity. If we can go to the next slide. This slide here provides a little more background on PGW's LNG assets. PGW currently has two LNG storage facilities. That's the Richmond and Passyunk plants. These two plants have a combined storage capacity of over 4 billion cubic feet. And the graphic on the left here is what's known as a load duration curve. This is a tool used by gas utilities commonly to help them to better understand how best to plan for and meet their system demand with the various supply resources at their disposal. Demand on this graphic is represented by the blue declining line. It's organized with the highest use days on the left and the lowest use days on the right, spanning an entire year. And then the shaded boxes are the various supply resources that PGW uses to meet this demand. You can see they have access to pipeline capacity. That's the green shaded box on the bottom, for all 365 days in a year to serve base load needs. They have access to seasonal pipeline capacity as well as storage capacity from anywhere from 60 to 120 days. Typically used in the winter to serve incremental heating demand. And then finally, the top box there on the left is their LNG storage inventory, which they use for that final increment of demand on the absolute 10 or 15 coldest days of the year they're serving that demand out of their LNG tanks. Looking at this graphic together, the area of each of these shaded supply resource boxes above and to the right of the demand curve is excess capacity, meaning across the board, PGW appears to have some capacity to increase load without needing to acquire additional supply resources. But I want to focus here on the LNG, the top brown box there, the LNG. You can see a good portion of that box and that supply resource is not utilized to meet demand. PGW's, for planning purposes, PGW's sort of winter need from LNG is around 2 BCF, or 2 billion cubic feet, which is half, roughly, of their storage capacity, meaning there's another 2 billion cubic feet that could be utilized to pursue some of these new and emerging markets for natural gas, and in particular LNG, that I referenced previously. At present, PGW is hindered in their ability to utilize this other, or this unused capacity by their liquefaction capabilities, both the technology and the capacity. That said, and despite those limitations, PGW has acknowledged these markets are there, they see the opportunity, and they have in fact begun making sales, albeit on a temporary basis, into some of these markets, the drilling and fracking markets, heavy-duty vehicles, and also deliveries to other gas utilities. This, as I said, is a temporary program basically meant to sell off surplus LNG that was amassed over recent, more mild winters. And it's important to note that in the long term, any kind of sustained presence in an LNG off-system sales market, they would need to be investing in additional LNG production capabilities. PGW knows this, and PGW is interested in this. So again, they're certainly aware of these opportunities and moving forward on many of them. And I think with that, I will turn it back to Bob.
I should have mentioned that Andrew grew up in Philadelphia, so he's a Phillies fanatic. Not the Philly fanatic, but as far as I know.
Hard to be a Phillies fan right now.
So the next, we're going to wrap up by talking about some of the specific opportunities. We have what we call an integrated strategy. It's about reducing costs, optimizing the LNG assets, increasing sales. The gas business is a very high fixed cost business. Anytime you can increase the amount of throughput through the system by serving new customers, that will spread those costs over more volumes. Denominator goes up, prices to individual customers would go down. I think more recently the opposite has been happening. So we want to turn that around to the extent possible and increase throughput on the system. And obviously helping customers consume gas more efficiently helps those customers directly, contributes to Philadelphia's green goals as well. So that's of all the things in terms of when you look out in today's market, energy efficiency, it's called the first fuel more frequently in today's world. It makes sense under any scenario. So by doing this, we hope to benefit PGW's customers, make Philadelphia more affordable and more attractive to businesses to move in, and create a stronger PGW. Now, PGW, as you're all aware, is much stronger today through the efforts of the last several years than it was several years ago. So that's, having experienced what it was like when PGW was not financially strong, we wouldn't want to do anything that would cause a regression in that progress. If anything, we want PGW to be stronger. PGW is already engaged. There's 6 opportunities we're going to discuss. PGW is already engaged in at least 5 of them, as we mentioned, and we'll give our interpretation and angle on what might be done to improve those or to support initiatives that PGW is currently considering. So we've got 6 opportunities. I'm going to hand it back to Andrew. We've got 6 opportunities that we think make a lot of sense, and we've got 2 that we don't think make sense, but we want to address them because they've received a lot of attention in the press and in the general discourse within the city. So Andrew is going to take the first 2.
Go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Bob. Sure. So starting off, number one, diversification of the gas supply portfolio. We think this is a clear and large opportunity for PGW and the city. As mentioned, they have already taken some steps to try and find and obtain lower cost gas from the Marcellus using their existing transportation contracts. We think there's possibly room for, it should certainly be examined if there's room for further steps in that direction using these existing transport assets. But we also think there's a big opportunity here in terms of bringing new pipeline capacity into the Philadelphia region, which benefits both sales customers and transport customers, and in the form of more gas and lower prices for all involved. We tried to we estimated a sort of order of magnitude value for this opportunity, and believe it's certainly attainable for PGW to attain cost savings through shifts in their gas supply of somewhere in the range of $17 million on an annual basis. To that end, we think PGW can, should, and it sounds like is, already looking at some of these things in terms of how much more can they do in terms of utilizing these existing transport contracts and reducing costs by shifting the supply from the Gulf up to the Marcellus region. And then also, they have integrated models with pricing and flows that they can run to try and best understand in terms of new pipeline capacity what the optimal amount would be, what the appropriate timing it would be, as well as sort of where on the system that would be most beneficial, where the connection should be. All of that likely is happening and certainly should be happening. And I would say they also can be out there in the market. Again, it sounds like they're doing this and have their finger on the pulse of this, but they should be out there speaking with pipeline companies, expressing their interest in bringing new capacity into the region. Philadelphia, or PGW, is a large enough customer and has sufficient load to, depending on how much of that load it's looking to shift to the Marcellus in terms of contracting for new pipeline capacity, to drive an expansion or a new pipeline build on their own. But that said, they should also be out talking to other potential large users of gas in the region, large industrials, to try and coordinate the timing and the interest here to make this more attractive and a better incentive to these pipeline companies to try and find critical mass and get a project built into the region. But we think that's a great opportunity. The second opportunity here is the optimization of the LNG assets, which I mentioned the 4 BCF of storage capacity is going right now about half unutilized or underutilized, and we think there's a great opportunity here for, through an investment in additional LNG production capacity, to sort of use this existing LNG storage capacity, which is currently oversized compared to the system needs, and take that investment and then go and pursue some of these new LNG markets that we discussed, whether it be in the transport sector or the industrial sector. And the fact that they can use this existing storage capacity while only needing to make the investment in the liquefaction or LNG production capacity puts them on a pretty good and solid competitive footing relative to competitors who would likely have to be investing in both liquefaction and storage in this region, at least initially. Again, here we estimated an order of magnitude value for this opportunity, and based on some assumptions regarding the size and cost of the added LNG production capability, as well as the margin earned, found that it would be reasonable for PGW to assume that they could earn anywhere from $8 to $10 million in net margin on an annual basis. To this end, I think the important steps to be taken here to advance this goal would be, number one, having a thorough engineering study conducted. I know PGW has taken initial steps, certainly, to evaluate what kind of investments need to be made to look at these markets, but a really thorough engineering study that would get at the limitations of the current system, as well as really firming up the cost estimate for what kind of investment would be necessary here. Also, it would be important to conduct a sort of deeper dive market study to really validate and understand the actual size and viability of these markets within the region that they'd be pursuing. And then finally, to understand the risks involved here. This is a competitive market that they'd be entering, which is different than their current operations as a gas distributor to their customers. These risks, there's no guarantee that this demand will materialize, will remain. The competitiveness of the market is uncertain. There are a lot of new risks here that would be a different type of risk for PGW. And in order to mitigate that, they might consider some kind of joint venture or public-private partnership. And so another step would be to really iron out and understand and get a good understanding of any of the legal hurdles and questions that linger about the ability to do that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Bob for the remaining opportunities.
Thank you, Andrew. I just want to follow up just briefly on the risk question. So there's been a lot of discussion about public-private partnerships. Can the city do them? Can they not? And we're not attorneys, so we won't. We've read the solicitor's opinion as, reasonably intelligent non-attorneys, but we won't be providing any legal opinions. But it all begins with the business case. No matter who pursues this opportunity, it begins with the business case. You look at the investment, you look at the market and the potential margins, potential competitors coming in. You look at it as if it's your own money, and the city council will be asked to approve, likely, a fairly significant investment. Andrew mentioned $50 million. That's not inconsequential, and determine what its assessment of the market might be. And as Andrew suggested, that needs to be looked at. So that will not be an easy decision. But we believe the market is certainly showing signs of strength and appears to be growing. So we do believe that it's an opportunity that should be seriously considered by the city. No question about it. Now, a private owner would have, and I'm going to put my regulator hat on for a second. First question is, with respect to a private owner, do they intend to do this through the regulated utility, or are they going to do this through a subsidiary that's unregulated? And so the regulator will care a lot about that question. If they're going to do it through the regulated utility, they'll want to make sure that if customers are in any way providing support for this, that if they're taking risk, they're compensated for that risk. So it's a fairly basic question. If the entity decides, no, we're going to play in this market on an unregulated basis, which they're able to do, they would go to their board and present the business case and raise the funds and pursue the opportunity. And that's they have the right to do that. The regulator is less concerned at that point. They'll want to make sure they're insulated from there being a problem, but they'll also be insulating and not benefiting from if it turns out to be a great business. So that's kind of the discussion that would take place. We're going to come back to that a little bit later with respect to the non-viable opportunities. In terms of the next opportunity, the NGV market, this is one where we're trying to increase throughput on the system. PGW will be selling more gas to refueling stations. So they're using the distribution network, dividing by the larger throughput, and lowering rates as a result, spreading those fixed costs over more volumes by doing so. So clearly, when you look at opportunities in the marketplace, if the CNG market and NGV market takes off in Philadelphia, this creates a very good opportunity for PGW, particularly since it already has high saturation in its other markets. So PGW has already acquired 24 sedans. There may be other city fleets that are candidates when those vehicles need to be replaced for CNG. The city will want to look at that. And there are other operators, private companies within the city that operate fleets. CNG is great for fleets that don't travel that far. So that's another opportunity as well. PGW has a consultant that's already engaged in this. The fourth opportunity we looked at was pursuing combined heat and power, helping businesses grow and converting customers. Again, this is all about increasing throughput on the system. we're particularly excited, and we know the PGW is, because they've been already selling combined heat and power units. These are on-site generation, fueled by natural gas. They allow the customer to avoid electric bills, save money on electricity. They generate a heat source that the Four Seasons Hotel, for example, one of the customers, can use to do laundry. So they have their very high efficiency units, and PGW is pursuing that aggressively. Okay. We would want to, in those circumstances, when you're in a business like this, you need to be able to provide incentives to the marketing team, so it might change the way that PGW operates. We would all want PGW to provide incentives to its employees to pursue these as aggressively as possible and be rewarded for doing so. The fifth opportunity is training workers. And this would be training Philadelphia residents to serve in this broader energy hub market. PGW will need new workers at some point to replace its retirees as they retire. If Philadelphia is successful in attracting other natural gas businesses, they will need workers. So there's an opportunity to train Philadelphia residents in coordination with other businesses and educational institutions, a market for the educational institutions as well. Investing in energy efficiency, the sixth opportunity. This one is something that has been particularly challenging for PGW. We've read through the reports. You can see just how hard PGW has been working on lowering the gas use of its customer responsibility program customers. They have a higher gas use than the average customer. We would say here there's an opportunity to look at sort of some breakthrough innovation, really something unique that sort of breaks the way that use, breaks the way they look at their homes. Every customer has an interest in making significant progress in this area. I won't go into much more detail other than to observe that there are some entities that are doing this in other cities, involving community organizations to work directly with this particular group of customers in ways that they haven't been interacted with before. In terms of the non-viable opportunities, we discussed it in terms of, and these are the ones that people mention in terms of Philadelphia becoming an energy hub, and we just want to be clear on what that might mean for PGW. We've really focused on PGW and its core businesses. The non-viable opportunities, and we addressed two. One is participating in the natural gas liquids market. That could be building their own pipeline and really getting in and marketing natural gas liquids. We view that as clearly beyond PGW's core competencies. It's not clear that they would even be able to acquire or afford to acquire the competencies they need to participate in that market. And when you look at the entities that are in that market, they have multi-billion-dollar balance sheets because it is a risky business. And we believe PGW should not be in that business, and we would question even other entities, private entities. They would need to approach this business very carefully. They would need significant size and probably already be in this business to enter this market. The same goes for LNG. Andrew talked about the interest in LNG exports. In this case, we're talking about the only viable opportunity is the Richmond facility. It's not clear. There has been a study done by a professional firm that's looked at this opportunity, CH4, it's a consultancy. They identified several fatal flaws. There's not enough land. You'd have to have LNG ships going up and down the Delaware River, raising all kinds of security concerns. If you were to go after this opportunity, you might spend tens of millions of dollars, and the answer might be you can't do it. So if you have tens of millions of dollars to throw after this market, I suppose you could do it. But it just does not seem viable from our perspective for PGW. And with that, I'll close. And I know we took a long time, but as we do get excited from time to time about natural gas.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you like one question. It's a multifaceted question. Basically, in conversations and to some degree in the summary, you reference the potential to generate additional dollars utilizing some aspects of what you've talked about today and I think it could be upwards of around $30 million, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
The things that we can actually do as a company. Is that a real number? And how difficult would it be to get to that number? Just the short version of, if people decided tomorrow, we're going to take the existing company and we're going to do these things so we can generate $30 million annually, upwards of that, and with respects to our ability to pay the debt service, say, for instance, on capital construction to expand our opportunities, be it an LNG or whatever, is that realistic?
We believe it's a realistic number. I mean, there's some band around it. There's a higher band and a lower band. It will take time. Many of the opportunities would take 2 or 3 years at the earliest before you could reconfigure the gas supply portfolio. You might be able to use your existing gas supply assets and achieve some incremental savings in the near term, but
Absolutely.
PGW would be able to really address that question. But developing the LNG facility would take a number of years. It's a major construction project, so it's not a one-year project. It's, probably 3 years.
Yeah.
And
I would add, so the first two opportunities here, the shifts in gas supply from the Gulf to the Marcellus, as well as the optimization of the LNG assets, drive that number that you referenced. Out of the approximately $30 million a year, those two, in our analysis, make up the majority of that. It's important to note those are order of magnitude values. In the case of gas supply, potential cost reductions. In the case of the LNG assets, potential new margin for the company. They're very real numbers. As Bob mentioned, there is certainly a range around them due to uncertainty. A whole host of factors would come into play in terms of just how much you could save by shifting supplies, what happens with natural gas prices, the differential between the two pieces, the cost of a pipeline if something is eventually built, and even that has a number of factors going into it. But they're very real numbers in that we believe, I'm speaking for Bob here, but I think it's fair. We believe those are both very real opportunities. The numbers may not be 17 million and 8 to 10 million, but if these opportunities are pursued, there is absolutely value in both of them, and it is substantial. It could be significantly higher. It could be a little lower. That is uncertain, but they are real numbers.
Okay.
And the energy efficiency, we didn't value at all. We have a 0 in for energy efficiency for the CRP customers.
Something that needs to happen.
And that does not require a major investment. It may be more of a behavioral response, so that could provide benefits. And that's real dollars that would come out of the bills that are paid by other customers.
Right.
So it's another reason to look at that carefully.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Councilman Good, you were teed up. It was this may have been when we were testing. You are teed up? Okay. So, Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. In terms of the highest and best use of the asset, with regard to maximizing opportunity, Mr. Yardley, is it your testimony that it doesn't make a difference who the asset is owned by, the city or UIL, or some other entity, that it's more about execution with regard to maximizing opportunities?
It's about execution no matter who owns the opportunity. It's decision-making, commitment, execution. We would expect a private owner to pursue many of these as well. The one that seems to be a little bit different is the LNG one because it requires this $50 million capital investment. So the actual implementation may be different, but we believe that PGW can pursue that. We certainly understand that a private owner could pursue that one as well.
Okay. If we sell the asset, what do we get other than one-time cash?
Yeah, that's
a lead-in question.
It is, yeah. And I'm the HBU guy, so I could take a crack at it if you want. But, it is a...
Let me ask the next question.
Yeah.
So we don't control long-time economic opportunities beyond that. we give up, when we give up the asset, we give up our control in terms of long-term economic opportunities.
You might give up some control. I don't believe that if you had an interest in, you might give up some control. I don't believe that if you had an interest in pursuing opportunities that would also benefit your then supplier, that they would certainly be willing to work with you. I have a hard time believing that.
Like, for instance, what is UIL's commitment in terms of diversity, in terms of ownership, in terms of business contracting, in terms of workforce?
Yep. I mean, those are in the contract, so I'm not familiar with the contract.
In terms of asset purchase agreement, what does it say in terms of diversity, in terms of ownership, in terms of business contracting opportunities, in terms of workforce diversity? What is the commitment
I
of
think
UIL?
is that addressed in our report?
Hi, I'm Lisa Culici. I'm with Concentric Energy Advisors, and I was part of the financial advisory team. And that question is better directed to the report addressing the proposed sale of PGW to UIL. With regard to a number of the factors that you referenced, as I understand the contractual commitment between UIL and the administration, UIL is committed to providing an EOP, an economic opportunity plan, after the closing of the transaction, which would address issues surrounding diversity and things of that nature.
So there is no economic opportunity plan, and there is no commitment right now to diversity?
Correct. There's nothing in the contract that identifies how that EOP would look or that specifies what the EOP is, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. So while we're in this room with a lot of people who have a lot of expertise, we're also being televised to a lot of citizens out there that have a great interest in the topic. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple questions that I think are important. You or your company and your team had the opportunity to review the paperwork and documents and data that was involved in the establishment of this request for qualifications and for the asset purchase agreement. Is that correct?
I'm going to invite Lisa up.
I'm going to stay put for a little while.
I could answer that.
So in our engagement, we had the opportunity to review a plethora of information that was made available through the solicitation process. Your question asked about the documentation leading up to that, and we certainly accessed certain information leading up to the decision to initiate a competitive solicitation, in particular 2 reports that were commissioned on behalf of the administration by an outside advisor that they retained. The majority of our due diligence materials, access to information, was the same type of information that was made available to the participants in the competitive solicitation.
Okay, so I have a report that says privileged and confidential, Concentric Energy Advisors, and it lists by date what material you reviewed and what meetings you had, including 6,000 documents and other confidential material, and then going through meetings with the mayor's administration, with legal services, with the union, with JP Morgan Securities, Loop Capital Markets, Ballard Spar, so forth and so on, PGW. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. So as you have reviewed that material, did you form an opinion as to what was the nature of this offering, what it was based on, what its goals were?
The mandate for our review of the transaction or the solicitation was to provide information to the council with regard, with regard to the nature of the contract, the nature of the proposed transaction. In so doing, we did an assessment of the value of the contractual terms vis-a-vis what I would call market norms, as well as vis-a-vis certain other public policy, social, workforce, and other considerations that we heard articulated to us by various council members and through various council members' staff. So that was the nature of our assessment.
And in doing that, in going through that process, there were options provided in the original Lazard report. Is that correct?
Yes, I think you're referring to the original strategic assessment that Lazard conducted on behalf of the administration with regard to the various options, strategic options that could be pursued for PGW.
About how many options were there?
I believe there were 5.
And did they rank the options in terms of most profitable for the city, best use for the city, or did they just provide 5 general options?
I will answer to the best of my ability, recognizing I'm not the author of that report, and my review of the report was I wouldn't say cursory, but it was simply a review. As I recall the report, what they did was they provided some level of assessment of each of the 5 opportunities or alternatives as they pertained to the ability to maximize proceeds to the city as well as to mitigate risks. In so doing, they identified their belief that the sale was the most viable alternative to satisfy those particular objectives.
In particular, was it a desire to obtain a certain amount of cash or maximize a cash value of the asset PGW? As opposed to getting the most amount of investment or the greatest amount of development?
Yep. Again, as I understand the report, there was evaluation performed that established a range of value, and the expectation of Lazard was that a sales process would fall within that range of value. I don't recall there being specific consideration of the value to the city of economic development or investment or other factors which have been raised by council members.
Right, and I raised some of those questions as to why was the offer limited to particular constraints as opposed to other larger opportunities? Why was it decided to pursue a very specific agenda for the sale of PGW?
And I'm not the best person to answer that question. I'm not certain why the decision was reached to pursue a solicitation that looked simply at securing proposals to sell as opposed to securing proposals to sell and other alternatives. I'm not privy to those discussions.
Were you, in your review of material, including press releases and public statements, did it come across your attention or your team's attention that at any point in time that the administration was primarily interested in obtaining a certain amount of cash to put into the pension fund?
My review, my team's review, was largely focused on the transaction itself, the contractual terms, and the materials that were exchanged. While we have looked at certain of the press and other public statements, we did not conduct an exhaustive review of that material, so I'm not really sure I can answer that question.
Okay. Did you come across any materials that indicated that the offer had in mind the sale of PGW with the idea that it would obtain a certain amount of money to invest into the pension fund to address a shortfall in the pension fund? And at the same time, did it indicate to you from your review that there was a desire to not have greater investment in fracking, natural gas liquids, liquid natural gas exports, and other things like that?
So I am aware that there, and in our report, which I can't put my fingers on the exact page immediately, we refer to what has been published by the administration as to the use of proceeds if the sale were approved, which includes the funding of pension program shortfalls. Beyond that, I'm not really the best person to answer the question as to other prohibitions or
So
considerations.
I had raised the question that it appeared to me that there were three general perceptions of the purpose of the sale of the asset. The first being because there was a shortfall or an emergency, a limitation. In other words, there was not enough money to replace pipe, which was dangerous and problematic. The second would be that there is a desire to get a certain amount of funds to put into the pension fund, and the entire purpose of the sale was to get a certain amount of money to balance out the pension fund. And the third would have been to sell the asset to develop Philadelphia's energy capacity in the highest manner possible. Those three possibilities. And did you or your team have any opinion as to which of the three or other options were the goal of this sale?
If you'll give me a moment, I'm going to provide you with a reference. Excuse me. Okay. Starting on page 28 and continuing on page 29, we identify the objectives of the administration as articulated through the various transaction materials for the sale. Those objectives do not address these particular three considerations that you raised. They do talk about maximizing proceeds and financial capacity of an acquirer, but they do not really get into this concept of pipe replacement of a certain amount of money. There was no dollar amount per se specified, or of positioning PGW in any particular way.
In the contract, what is the replacement of pipe?
The replacement of pipe is not addressed in the contract per se.
In the news media, I have read that the buyer stated that they would reduce the replacement of pipe by half the time, from approximately 90 years to 50 years. Is that in the contract?
That is not in the contract.
Is there any report that would indicate that any study was done, there was any objective criteria in order to reduce time from 90 years to 50 years?
I'm not aware of a specific study that's been made available by UIL with regard to their ability or plans to do that.
In terms of the testimony previously that natural gas liquids and liquid natural gas exports were in both cases too big, and in one case too risky or too late, was it your understanding at any time that the buyer had expressed a plan to do NGLs and LNG exports?
We have not seen that I recall. I do think they may have discussed potentially looking at the LNG assets and doing more with those, but I don't recall.
Yeah, specifically to your points of NGL, some kind of presence in the natural gas liquid market, or LNG exports specifically, I don't recall anything either.
Am I taking up too much time, Council President? I guess so. Head shaking.
Councilman, I don't know what happened, why that clock went off. I didn't think we had a time limit. It just went off, sir.
I could wait. I could come back later.
No, and I'm sorry, Councilman, but we have because we have 2 days, we got a lot of people, and we do need to.
I will stop asking questions.
No, it's okay. We don't want to eliminate. We just want to, because we do have a number of people. We'll come back.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon. I want to start off with a simple question, and one of the reasons why we're here. I know there's a lot of questions that we could ask. Whether we should privatize PGW or not privatize PGW. What are our options? Whether there's P3 opportunities in new businesses, but my question to start off is, can you explain what a regional energy hub is?
We actually had the same question at one point because there's so much, it's a term that just seems to have been thrown around. But clearly, the location close to the Marcellus and the ability to bring NGLs as Sunoco, the type of activity that Sunoco is pursuing creates or could create, particularly if other clusters of similar businesses that either benefit, use NGLs, were to come into this area because a workforce starts to be developed, then you can create a situation where a cluster of related businesses related to NGLs, related to gas more traditionally, taking advantage of the transportation infrastructure in the Philadelphia area, the port and so forth. Then you could get a situation where you would say Philadelphia is a viable energy hub.
Do you think we have those infrastructures, those resources, those companies? I mean, I see some of the energy industry here, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of their expertise. And we certainly have the workforce, which has made PGW as valuable as it is because they are part of the infrastructure. But at any given time, we can employ 1,500 people at one of our petrochemical facilities, and supplying a highly trained workforce. So, do you think, as you described, that we are in a position to become, or we already are positioned to be a regional energy hub?
I can give a personal opinion, I guess, as much as anything. I don't know if it's really an expert opinion, but whenever a region has an opportunity to take advantage, to leverage existing assets, or in this case, proximity to the natural resources, and has ports that they can just take those resources and reach export markets where a lot of the opportunities seem to be for NGLs, that region has an obligation to look at that opportunity and see what government can do to contribute to the success of those ventures.
And I think
PGW can do.
And I think the government here certainly is willing to take a look at that, to take advantage of those opportunities. So we have the port, we have the dredging of the river, we have land preservation for industrial land in anticipation of hopefully new business. We have, so that would be our waterways. We have a vibrant and active rail system, and our transportation hubs on our roads are certainly interchangeable and a connector to the East Coast. With that being said, again, we are in a very good position to become a regional energy hub.
That's correct. And the opportunity for PGW might be to provide natural gas service to some of these companies that come in, and to help coordinate with them to train workers, and to help those new companies use technology so that they're using natural gas as efficiently as possible. So there are many things that might come together.
Absolutely. And in one of your colleagues' testimony, you talk about the wet gas and the new business opportunities, and shale being a rich natural resource instead of coming from the West Coast. We have the opportunities here. There was talks about a pipe, whether PGW can build a pipeline or having another private entity build a pipeline. With all that has been said, in your research and due diligence, thank you, by the way, of new business opportunities for PGW. Do you see that in its future?
I see, I see a lot of potential, and back to your original question on sort of, does Philadelphia have what it takes to become an energy hub? I think it has many of the important building blocks, and energy hub is a fairly vague term. Energy encompasses quite a few things, but I would agree with the infrastructure in terms of transport, ports, rail, highways, that's all there. I would say with the universities, the potential for training, specific training for these types of industries has a lot of potential. And then I would give another example here, or an analogy. Houston is often referred to as an energy hub. And sort of the Gulf Coast in general, coastal Louisiana, Houston, a lot of that has to do with the fact that originally gas and oil production was occurring in that general region. So because of that, there was interest from manufacturers, petrochemical plants to site there in that location where resources were available nearby on a low-cost basis. And there are pipelines, rail lines, canals running resources from all parts of North America to Houston. Because of that original point, there is now the ability to terminal things there, process products there, refine products there, as well as now, as we sort of become a producer again, export products. The development of the Marcellus and Utica Shale, in some cases 100 miles from Philadelphia, in some cases 3, depending on where in the region you're looking at. Folks like Sunoco are looking at that and saying, these products don't need to be sent all the way to Houston at a higher cost of longer pipelines to those facilities. There's the potential, especially because many of these markets, export and domestic, are right here in the Northeast or across the Atlantic in Europe, to terminal, store, and process and export these products right here in the Mid-Atlantic. And with the building blocks I discussed, the port facilities, a fairly established and somewhat newly revitalized refining operations within the city and the local area, I think there is some potential for certainly increased energy activity that could have a snowball effect and draw additional interest from other industrial users looking at using these products, whether it's gas to run their operations or the natural gas liquids as feedstocks for industrial or refining purposes. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. So you cited Houston as
Council.
another example of the
Councilman.
regional.
We're on the timer now.
I didn't see anybody's lights on. My apology.
Yeah, that's no
I'll
problem.
wait.
No, I know we got a pretty long board. We'll come back, sir. To recognize Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
I want to
Councilwoman.
revisit and circle back to questions raised by my colleague, Councilman W. Wilson Good, around an OEO plan for the record. Was there any discussion text given to need for, possibility for an OEO plan in your discussions, meetings, or document?
So the contract, the purchase contract, refers to a commitment or requirement to file that plan within a time frame after closing.
And there was no specific time frame range given around to after closing?
I'll need to double check. I don't recall off the top of my head if there was a specific number of days certain for that.
Given the wealth of experience at the table, in what areas could an MBE, WBE, DBE be offered opportunity to be a part of this major type of enterprise? What are some of the skill areas or industry areas? What type of contracts could MBE, WBEs, just for our own record here?
I will be honest, that's not something we really considered. It's outside of the transaction that was proposed, so we really didn't go beyond the scope of the specific proposal.
But what does your experience tell you?
mean, I can take a...
Yeah, I'm
I
a
would say
little,
certainly many of the utilities that we work for and other entities, government and
Speak
utilities.
louder and
I'm
into
sorry.
the mic, please.
Many of the firms that we seek to work for, both public and private utilities, will request that we bring that type of team to the engagement. So it is something that's becoming more prevalent in the private sector. It is very common with state and public entities that we work for.
But my question is more narrow. Specific examples of skill set areas or industry areas or contract areas where one might engage in an MBE, WBE, DBE.
Well, everything that we do, our consulting services, is certainly a candidate for that. I mean, that's the type of request that we get. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. I'm sorry.
Councilman Good?
For example, infrastructure replacement. That would be an area where there would be opportunities.
That would certainly be an area where there would be opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a particular category that's excluded or included. I mean, it would be across the whole spectrum of outside services that an entity. Yeah, I can't imagine.
No, Councilman, she couldn't hear what you were saying. No, the stenographer didn't hear what you said.
Are there any areas that would be excluded from Councilwoman Brown's? Is it back on? Okay. Are there any areas that would be excluded from Councilwoman Brown's question, as opposed to included? Is there any that would be excluded in your experience or reading?
I've never seen any excluded.